hope that gives us that inner belief that we need to be successful in this competition.
Eddie Howe, a god on the tide.
Sit up Europe, Newcastle United are well and truly back centre stage.
You say it, Graeme. Newcastle United are back centre stage. God, it's quite moving, that package, I've got to say. Bit of Sam Fender in the background as well. Rory Jennings, this is The Social on talkSPORT 2 with me, Olly Clink, big Newcastle United fan. What a night it was last night. Rory, can I just talk about why it was so special last night?
Yes.
Why it was so special for me in terms of the way that they won it. I think for me, you've got to look at the goal scorers. Firstly, Miggy Almiron, who was ridiculed by Jack Grealish. You know, he was a laughing stock because of Jack Grealish's drunken antics. And look, he's apologised since, but my word, has Almiron proved him wrong, not just last season, but now scoring on the biggest stage. And I was so happy for him for that. Then it's Big Dan Burn. Big Dan Burn, who never thought he'd play for Newcastle United, living his dream, scoring a header that Shearer would have been proud of.
Yeah, there is something very special. Even I, who didn't want Newcastle United to win, even I can concede there is something truly beautiful about Dan Burn scoring. Like a man from the northeast who's found his way back there. Like he's played for Darlington. Yeah. And he's now scored in front of the Gallagher. Like he has done something truly spectacular. And even I can appreciate like how much that means. Like, how on earth are we asking the question? Like, you know, at one point, I would have said to you in a fairly sneery way, Dan Burn won't be able to cope with what PSG are going to throw at him. The truthful question is, PSG won't be able to cope with Dan Burn.
Yeah, absolutely bang. So many people said it before that attack would be too much for Dan Burn. He is continually underrated, and last night proved everyone wrong once again. Next goal scorer, Sean Longstaff. Sean Longstaff, who was out of Steve Bruce's team, who had no future at the club, who was going to move to Everton, then scores the third goal. Another unbelievable performance from him. And he's starting to become a player that I think makes this team tick. And then the fourth. The fourth from Fabian Schär. What a goal. That's the best moment of my life, that goal.
That goal, it's huge, isn't it?
Did you know what I thought, though, Rory, as he ran away? Wheeling away like this. Oh, yeah. What a goal. I just thought, at least he's really ugly. Do you know what I mean? At least he's not good looking at all. Yeah. And he gets to live my dream scoring an absolute screamer against PSG. But for me, that is so important. And look, there's so many questions about the ownership. Completely accept that. Completely understand that. But it wasn't £60 million Isak who scored. It wasn't £40 million Bruno who scored. It wasn't £40 million Gordon, let alone the fact that they were magnificent on the night. It was those lads, 3 of which were there before the takeover.
That's very significant, isn't it? That really is significant.
And that shows just how well Eddie Howe has done.
I know. Could you have dreamed that the return to Champions League football at St James's Park would be this?
No.
Like, this is beyond,
Honestly,
isn't it?
no.
Like, this is beyond, because when I think we still see Paris Saint-Germain as being the Galactico team, a team full of icons, and although it's not quite as true as it once was, it's still a pretty special team, isn't it?
They have one of, if not the best player in the world. He played at St James's Park last night. And in a way, for some fans, that was the talk of the town. You know, on my word, Kylian Mbappe's in our city. Kylian Mbappe's going to play on our pitch. Well, we completely rewrote that. Rewrote that and absolutely dominated them.
It's one for the ages, isn't it? It's one for the ages. You know, if you think about like iconic Newcastle United results over the years, there are, I don't know, say you were to rank them. This is potentially number one?
I'm biased because, to be honest, I'm a bit too young to remember some of those unbelievable nights like beating Barcelona, but
the Asprilla
hat-trick. You know, and listen, I can't really comment because I didn't see it, I wasn't there. But for me, this is number one. Just for everything it stands for the way that the club have climbed back to this point. I think this is number one with the manner in which they did it as well.
It's amazing to think that Jamal Lascelles was captain of Newcastle in 2016 and he's captained them against Newcastle in 2023 and hasn't put a foot wrong.
No.
Against an electrifying forward line.
Again, so unbelievably proud of him and for him. He was a player that got that captaincy for speaking out against the club, for being a mouthpiece, I think, sometimes for the fans. And he deserved that chance last night. And listen, obviously if Sven Botman had been fit, he would have played, but you're absolutely bang on, Rory. The way he didn't put a foot wrong was just brilliant and just typified the spirit of this group as well. But for me, Eddie Howe just has to take so many plaudits for this. He got everything right about that game. PSG were poor, but the way he got on top of them, the way that we pressed, we were teaming all over them in that game. I just think tactically he got it bang on. He got his substitutes right as well.
What do you think this means for Newcastle in the Champions League? Because the pandemonium that you created at St James's Park, it's never going to be easy for anyone. And don't get me wrong, PSG are a very good team, but they're not one of the best teams. But what you could do to the best teams, it's still going to have that kind of impact.
Imagine being Borussia Dortmund going there next. There's no way they're going to be thinking, we might get a result there. There's no way. They'll be trembling, as will AC Milan, I think. And I think you can make a really good point. And I have to say, I did say this before the group stage even started, when we got that draw. We would be very good at home. We're always good at home. It's an absolute fortress. And Eddie Howe actually spoke after the game about using the crowd and making sure that they get the crowd on side, because it's such a weapon for Newcastle United. I have a bone to pick with Simon Jordan.
Okay.
Not for the first time, but I heard him speaking on White and Jordan this morning. They got onto the topic of Eddie Howe, of course, after such a kind of statement win. But Simon's still not convinced, and he actually said that Howe is Newcastle's version of Mark Hughes at Manchester City. Let's have a listen.
When a club changes direction and pivots on a sixpence, Eddie Howe cannot have got his timing better. They could have put Genghis Khan in control of Newcastle post Mike Ashley, and the Newcastle fans would have rallied around with this fervour that they've got. The feeling, the energy, the vitality of Newcastle, you're coming in at perfect timing.
Yeah.
Then you can get a group of players playing better, and you get £300 million to supplement the playing squad. I think he feels a little bit, and it may be unkind, it feels a little bit like the Mark Hughes transition from when Sheikh Mansour takes over. Hughes starts to buy big players. He starts to build a Man City side that are really starting their engines. And then Mancini says, thanks very much, I'll take it from here, and wins the league.
There we go. Simon Jordan there speaking about Mark Hughes at Manchester City and comparing him to Eddie Howe and his achievements at Newcastle United. I'll let you go first on this, Rory. What did you make of what Simon had to say there?
I think, to your annoyance here, I don't think it's as far wide of the mark as you think it is. I think Eddie Howe is doing everything right. Don't get me wrong. He outsmarted Luis Enrique. I think Luis Enrique was the architect of his own downfall as well. Picking 4 attackers and 2 midfielders isn't a sensible way to approach a game at St James's Park. And I think Enrique has underestimated Howe and Newcastle. So other teams will learn from that. So the question then becomes, is Eddie Howe the man to rethink himself, to reimagine his team? Because you will not have the opportunity to shock and awe another opposition. So you mentioned Dortmund coming to St James's. Yeah, they're coming, but they're coming with preparation. They're coming with knowledge. They're coming with data now. So you're not going to be able to do that. You won't be able to blitzkrieg your way through.
I disagree with that, because we did it for the whole of last season with most of the teams in the Premier League. I mean, they knew what they were expecting when they were coming to St James's Park.
Nobody, again, is going to come with two midfielders and 4 attackers, which is what Enrique did, which is an error. And I think he'd have to admit that's an error. So the question then becomes, and we can disagree on this, the question then becomes, you need to find another way. So the manager needs to have another trick up his sleeve, another way to approach the game, another way to redefine his players, redefine his team. Is Eddie Howe that man? Is he the tactical genius that you are going to need to ultimately win a Champions League?
I think he is, because if you actually look at the way Newcastle attack as well, and you mentioned they're adapting to games, they are one of the most unpredictable teams in terms of an attacking sense that exists in the Premier League. They sometimes will go over the top, sometimes they'll slip it down in the channels. That's what makes them so difficult to play. So I think talking about them adapting in that sense doesn't really work in terms of Eddie Howe. Now, in terms of that, what he was talking about in terms of Mark Hughes, I just don't understand that, because when Mark Hughes took over at Manchester City, firstly, he had unbelievable riches that he could spend. Now, the difference with Howe is that, yes, he has spent money, I'm not taking that away, and yes, you know, some of them have been big signings, but he hasn't had free reign in the transfer market. He hasn't been able to pick and choose whoever he wants. Hence the signings, let's be honest, of players like Dan Burn, and Kieran Trippier has been fantastic, and he is a top-tier player, but he came for, 15 million as well? Yeah. Absolute bargain. So fantastic recruitment. But also, he took over Newcastle when they were 19th, 20th. Yeah. And last night they beat PSG in the Champions League.
I think he's done, there's no two ways about it, he's done very well. But the question then becomes, does he have the glamour? Does he have the prestige? Does he have the managerial ability to take you? Because your expectations at the moment
Is he not,
are going to change massively.
Why? This is what I never understand when Simon / you talk about this, is why aren't you giving Eddie Howe the chance to build that glamour, to build that prestige?
Oh, absolutely. He could prove me wrong, and I think last night is part of him proving me wrong. But my belief is that he is going to hit his ceiling fairly soon. And I think when he pulls a result out the bag like last night, the problem and almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that could be in tune with what I'm saying here is fans' expectations will drastically change. Almost immediately. So you didn't see it coming yesterday. You would have accepted a draw, but now you've battered them 4-1. So when he goes into the Dortmund game, suddenly you're thinking about it in a very different way. You've gone from thinking maybe we could get 9 or 10 points and hopefully go through in second to thinking we're going to top this group, because that's how quickly these things change. And it's true to supporters, but it will also be true to the ownership. And I think that their ambitions will change. So presumably at the time, being in the Champions League was a great success. Suddenly, a semi-final becomes the success. He could do it. Do you think he is that guy?
I genuinely do. I genuinely do, from the way that I've seen him develop as a manager and develop our team over this time. It's just utterly ridiculous. I'm starting at times to think, obviously there's been certain off days, there's been bad days at the office, there's been games we haven't won, of course there have. But there are times where you look at the way that he has developed this team, and there are very few flaws to look at in terms of his management style, not just tactically, but the way that he has, energised that crowd. And I know what Simon was saying about you could have brought in Genghis Khan as the manager and it would have been great. I don't agree with that. I think that we needed a manager that was going to turn around and bring results. And that's what he's brought. But he's also done it in a way where he's brought fantastic characters into the club, really talented players. And actually, I've got a theory for you, Rory. Everyone talks about the fact that Eddie Howe will be moved on by Newcastle. I think we might be reaching a stage where Eddie Howe moves on from Newcastle. And maybe not in club football. I'm talking about the England job.
Yeah, I could see that
He's
happening.
the best English manager. Gareth Southgate's going.
The problem is, though, I think his success rate at Newcastle is actually going to put him in the bracket above an international manager. I think if you're competing and succeeding in the Champions League, if you're beating and schooling Luis Enrique, you're probably not quite ready.
Can I ask you a question though? If you were Eddie Howe, you've got this amazing project at Newcastle going on. You've got a chance to, take your reputation sky high, because he will be. Because whether he's moved on or not, he will, I think, be given a chance to prove himself in that regard, because he's got so much credit in the bank from what he's achieved so far. But if you're Eddie Howe and England come knocking and you've got that England squad to play with, you could win a World Cup.
Absolutely.
You could win a Euro. So what would you do if you were Eddie Howe in this situation?
It's a really difficult situation. I think the allure of managing England at a World Cup, particularly this golden generation of England players, is something that you can't really look beyond. But equally, the challenge of international football isn't as inspiring as the challenge of being Newcastle manager in the Champions League. Imagine, it's all very well to talk about the legacy of being the England manager to win the World Cup, but you might not. I think he is on course to win silverware at Newcastle. Being the first manager to win silverware at Newcastle since when? 55?
55 domestically, yeah.
Like that's...
It's ridiculous.
I mean, that's statue Jackie Milburn territory, isn't it?
Yeah,
easily. That's up there.
But Jason Tyndall would have to be on the statue as well.
No, I'm talking about the statue for him. Eddie Howe unveils it.
Oh, it would have to be bronze as well, obviously, for the skin. Yeah, unbelievable. But God, that would be tough, wouldn't it? Because Eddie Howe has spoken in the past as well about England being
the Newcastle job at the moment, from Howe's perspective, is the dream job. I don't think there is a job in world football that Howe would say I will leave for, and that includes the England job. I don't see why you would. It's going so well. He's proving himself. He's getting the plaudits that he deserves. And I think anyone that was a slight detractor of his from his time at Bournemouth, that they didn't set up a defence well. Yes, I know he did very well there, but there were errors. He's proving people wrong, me included, left, right, and centre. So I don't see why he would go anywhere.
Yeah,
I think the issue will become if the Newcastle ownership, who are incredibly ambitious, will be able to turn that. If it goes slightly wrong, and a Mourinho type character is available,
who would be the next successor for you? Do you think?
This is the question, right?
Realistically,
hypothetically,
who would
this
you
is the
bring
point
in?
I'm probably inarticulately trying to make. if you are the PIF and the prestige that goes with being the PIF and what you want Newcastle to be, could they turn down Zinedine Zidane? Do you know what I mean? It's not about...
honestly, thinking as a fan, I'd rather have Eddie Howe. Honestly, I would.
I think you're correct.
Yeah.
I think you're correct. But I could just see a world where the ambition... If Eddie Howe's results slip a touch, I think the ambition and the statement that it would make to have Zinedine Zidane part of the... Remember, this is all bigger than Newcastle United's first 11 and Newcastle United's results. This is all part of a plan to get the World Cup to Saudi. This is all a big project. And Zinedine Zidane's endorsement of that, I saw Riyad Mahrez put a tweet out today, by the way, about the World Cup in Saudi. Everything that's going on is all kind of in tune with that. I just don't know if Eddie Howe is the name that amplifies the bid for the World Cup in the way that Mourinho, Conte, Zidane would.
You say that, but I just think if Newcastle can keep performing and doing well and beating the best sides in Europe,
he makes himself unsackable.
He does. He
makes himself totally indispensable to the club.
Just very quickly, lastly, how far do you think Newcastle can get in the Champions League? Having seen last night.
I think that home form is terrifying. And it makes me think of Chelsea way back in the day when we first got into Europe. Like, we didn't go into the Champions League, but even when we were in the Champions League, we did really well, actually. We got to the quarterfinals. We beat Barcelona 3-1. Luis Figo scored a goal, which ultimately meant we went out in extra time over there. But I can see shades of it. I think you're capable of a semi-final.
Did you support Newcastle last night?
No.
In the game?
No.
You didn't?
Passionately.
Why?
Not. I don't.
The Geordies.
I don't ever. Do you know what I did? I did enjoy. I did enjoy Byrne and Longstaff's story, and I'm obviously pleased for my friends that are Newcastle fans, such as yourself. But no, I don't really support English clubs in Europe apart from Chelsea. It's bitter.
But they're not in Europe.
But it's for reasons such as this. In fact, yeah, it's very bitter. It's snide. It's unnecessary. It's provocative. And it's tribal and idiotic, but that is football.
No, do you know what's funny about this, though, is that I've been a Newcastle fan, for obviously over the past over 20 years. And because Newcastle quite often weren't in European competition, I don't know why. And I now look back on it, I'm like, why did I do this? But I'd find myself back in the English club. I really would.
Regardless of
who?
Manchester United, for example.
Yeah,
really?
I don't know why, and I'll never do it again. I promise you, I'll never do it again.
I made a mistake towards the beginning of the. When West Ham embarked on their campaign, like one of my mates, big West Ham fan, he went over to Croatia. They played them early, and I remember accidentally wanting them to win because my mate had gone, and it was a competition I had never really heard of or whatever. Then they get to a final and win it, and they're telling me they've won Euro, and I think, I wish I'd never supported you early. I made a mistake. I won't make the mistake again.
Fair enough.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.